what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
Footcandle Films. Film news and reviews from two guys who really like movies.
This episode is brought to you by the Footcandle Film Society. For a schedule of upcoming screenings and membership information, visit the Society's website at www.footcandle.org.
Hello everyone, welcome to Footcandle Films. This is our film review and discussion show here on themesh.tv. My name is Alan, with me is Chris. Chris, what's up, man?
Oh, lots of films coming out, lots of things to review. It's a good time for movies, I guess.
Yeah, it's actually pretty good. We're kind of getting at the tail end of the summer blockbuster season. So in spite of, because of that fact, because of all the blockbusters we've been talking about the last few episodes, we're going to scale it down just a little bit for this week's show. We've actually got two films we're going to be reviewing, both of them smaller films.
Right.
The first one will be the Steve Jobs biopic called Jobs. And then we'll be talking about an interesting documentary called The Act of Killing. So both of those, I know Jobs is playing at some big theaters right now, getting some play. The Act of Killing, probably not but as much. But we'll talk about both those films in just a moment, as well as hit a couple quick news items about some things happening in the movie world. And we're going to end up our show, just like we normally do, by giving our recommendation of a film we think you ought to check out online. Maybe you missed it. Maybe it didn't get quite the acclaim or recognition it should have. Something we think, is worth checking out, especially if it's available online. So that's going to be our show today on Footcandle Films. We'll look forward to talking with you here in just a moment. But before we get started, just a reminder, you are listening to themesh.tv. This is our online network of shows ranging from like film review, like you're listening to now, to business, to education, to sports. We've got a lot of different things happening on the Mesh Network. We encourage you to check out our website at themesh.tv. You can find us on iTunes. You can find us on Stitcher Radio. We've got all of our shows available in both those locations. So check it out. Listen to some old episodes. Let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you. So, Chris, let's jump right into our first review, which will be the biography film about the founder of Apple Computer, Steve Jobs, aptly named Jobs.
The board is unanimous. Steve will no longer be involved in this company.
10 years after Steve Jobs' departure, the future of Apple Computer is in jeopardy.
In life, you only get to do so many things. We're gonna make Apple cool again. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
Alan, you are probably one of the, I don't want to call you a fanboy, because I guess that can be considered to be derogatory.
Yes, fanboy is not a great word.
No, but you are an Apple aficionado. You know lots of things about Apple. You probably read most of the books, I guess, that have been written about Steve Jobs.
Sure.
You also co-host a podcast here on the Mesh Network called New Stuff, where you talk about technology. So yes. You're pretty well versed in this stuff.
Well, and just even to back that up even further, I had an Apple IIe growing up as one of my very first pieces of electronics. My father had one of the very first Macs in 1984 that I learned how to use.
Excellent.
Yes, every computer I've owned has been a Mac. So sure, Apple, Steve Jobs, that whole history.
Did you play either Dark Castle or Zork?
Both.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Clearly,
as
they're his
Castle Wolfenstein, as well as Apple Adventure. I mean, yeah, you name it, I was doing it.
So with Jobs, obviously, as you said, briefly discussing it, it is about the life of Steve Jobs and talking about from how he was a college dropout all the way up to how he was an entrepreneur, one of the greatest entrepreneurs of the 20th century, and obviously formed this company you've probably heard of called Apple.
Yes.
This is the first. Well, actually, it's not the first. The first was I, Steve, starring Justin Long.
Actually, it goes even further back. There was a movie called The Pirates of Silicon Valley years ago. With Noah Wiley as Steve Jobs. It wasn't just about Steve Jobs.
Was it Anthony Michael Hall?
Anthony Michael Hall as Bill Gates.
Excellent.
So that was actually the first dramatization we ever had of Apple's evolution.
And you've seen. I have not seen it. You've seen it.
Yes.
How was that?
It was actually pretty good.
Okay.
It was more of a TV movie type
Sure.
format. It wasn't high dollar, high budget, but I mean, it was well acted and well done. Sure.
Okay. So since the passing of Steve Jobs,
Yes.
the first film to come out was I, Steve, done by Funny or Die
Yeah.
with Justin Long playing it. Okay.
Yes.
So have you seen that?
No, I have not.
I've seen a little bit of it. It's pretty funny.
Okay,
In
yes.
prep for this review, I actually watched a little bit of it. Okay, so there was I, Steve. But then there's this movie starring Ashton Kutcher as the Steve Jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also in the works a movie with the screenplay being done by Aaron Sorkin that
Yes.
will also, I guess, more maybe based upon the book that came out.
Based more on the Isaacson biography
book. Okay.
that's been out in the last year. And no, that one's getting a lot of the press right now about
Sure.
what are they going to do with the big Steve Jobs biography
Sure.
based on the big book. This one talked about the same time when the other one was announced. I think they hustled up the production on this one to make sure they kind of beat it to the market and got out there. And
Sure.
we're still relatively close to Steve's passing.
Sure. So knowing all that history, that there's still a Steve Jobs movie on the horizon that's going to be coming out, how did you feel about this movie, the presentation of Steve Jobs as a person, and also about trying to explore the legacy that was what he left behind? And how did you feel? How did you feel it did?
Pretty mad, actually.
Really? Okay.
Well, I'll actually, and I'll say that because I'm probably the wrong person to review this film.
Okay.
Just because I really have savored Apple's history, Steve Jobs' history, background. I was excited to see it presented in a film format.
Sure.
But wow, this movie actually really bothered me. And not for the reasons that I think most of the people out there would think it would bother me.
Okay.
So let me talk about the good things first.
Sure,
That may
let's
be
do
a little
that.
surprising that I really enjoyed about it.
Okay.
I think Ashton Kutcher was okay. I'm not going to say he was great, but I think he may be performing at about his maximum acting capacity in this film.
Sure.
Is that a nice diplomatic way to say that he probably couldn't have done much better than what he's capable of doing in this film? His performance didn't bother me, and actually the performances of the other actors didn't bother me. I think for the most part they did a good job. I think I didn't have any problem with anybody in the film.
Okay.
The biggest issue for me, well, actually, let me give another positive
Sure.
before I get into the negatives.
Okay.
The other positive is I totally expected this to be a Lifetime movie production quality version of a film from what I had heard in some of the previews I saw. It was a little better, higher production quality than I expected.
Sure. Okay.
That's my two positives.
Okay. Well, since we're in the positive
Go ahead and
section,
stay in the positive area. Here for a
I
little
will
bit.
say that I am not very. I know who Ashton Kutcher is. All I know him from really is from Punk'd. I never watched that '70s show. Never really a big fan of his because he always really irritated me.
Yeah.
So I agree with you that his performance in this, actually, I'll go ahead and say it saved the movie for me.
Okay.
His performance. I'm really now. Was it flawless? No, but the parts where I thought it kind of was let down, I blame that on the director and the script.
Mm-hmm.
I do not blame that on Ashton Kutcher.
I'm with you.
And why I say that is because, I think he looks a heck of a lot like Steve Jobs.
It was
so he
almost
had
scary in
he
some
had that
places how
going
much
for
he
him.
looked
And there
like
were
him.
times when I was watching it that I forgot that I wasn't watching like footage of something
Yes.
because he was so dead on. So I was really impressed with that. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, there were some negatives and things that dragged it down, but I was impressed. I actually regret that they didn't save him for the movie that's coming out with Aaron Sorkin because I am going to have a hard time. I mean, I don't even know, have they cast that movie
No,
yet? I
they
don't know.
haven't.
But I'm going to have a hard time, unless it's like Noah Wyle, who originally did it way back when.
Which it won't be.
Which it won't be. But he looked so much the part, and he had the stare down and kind of, the mannerisms and things that he would do. That was what really jumped out to me as being positive. I'll also say that with Steve Jobs, there are instances that you've heard about his presentations or his meetings he would have with his staff. And I thought there weren't enough of those moments that I felt like really hit home, but there were some. And I thought that Ashton Kutcher, those scenes were well scripted out and kind of captured who Steve Jobs was. And I'll just mention some quick
Sure,
ones just
okay.
so we can spend a little bit more time on the positives.
Yeah,
That's
sure,
right.
yeah,
That's
we're
right.
going to bask in the positives for a little
So the movie has it's the beginning, kind of starts. The nature of the movie is it starts at the iPod. I guess when he announced to his staff that they were going to be
bit. It was
putting the
kind of a
iPod.
team meeting
It
on
was
the
a
Apple
team meeting.
campus announcing the iPod.
And I thought the way that he interacted with a room full of people showing off the iPod, I thought was pretty good.
It's pretty natural compared to like what really happened, from what I understand.
So I thought that was a good, and that gave me a good feeling at the beginning of the movie. I was like, okay, I think this is going to work. 2 other times in the movie that I thought were really positive scenes where he was starting up the Mac team. And the way he handled going around and getting people and convincing them to come work within the Apple Corporation. He had a division that he started up doing the Macintosh. And the way that was handled, from what I understand from reading the book, and I thought that was pretty close to probably what had happened. And then there was early on in the film, there was also a sequence when he was working at Atari and kind of how that all went down with him not really fitting in, but yet he was able to. They knew he was smart, and he kind of went out on his own, and you have the introduction of Woz, which that was not a strong point. but then him and Woz sitting in the garage and him getting him to build some circuit boards and make money, you kind of saw what the relationship was going to be between him and Woz. And you
saw a good foundation of what could have been explained better later.
Sure,
yes, it started off okay.
So there were scenes that worked well, and they all centered around, I think, Kutcher's performance as Jobs. So those were positives for me.
Yeah, and I think there are some key moments knowing the Apple history like I do. It was nice to see on screen the Homebrew Computer Club, where they made their presentation. Supposedly that was a very realistic depiction of how that club looks. I mean, you read about things, you kind of envision them working in the garage. It was nice to have some visuals with it, some things that you could latch onto. But I think you've already hit on what the biggest problem is. It's really the 2 things. One, the director. I don't know this director. I've never seen anything else.
I think it's his first film.
Well, it shows because it was really poorly directed.
Okay.
And then secondly is the script. I'm sorry, the script was absolutely horrible in this film for 2 reasons. One, the dialogue was so stilted at times and so on the nose. The dialogue, there's a scene where Woz and Steve are driving to the Homebrew Computer Club, trying to decide what the name of their company is going to be. It's
that's bad.
What about Apple? It's like, almost just so forced. It was just, we have to cram this dialogue into this one little key scene. Let's make it so just on the nose. Like, it was eye-rolling at times. And a lot of scenes were like that. It was just so sappy in the way it was done. I think the dialogue was really bad. I think the whole format of the film
didn't work.
I think it was good starting out. I think the flash forward to like more closer to modern day and seeing where he is as an older established leader of Apple is great, and then go backwards and come back to when he's young. But they spent so much time on the first part of his life where he's young and starting, but then they kind of skim through so much after that where it's just kind of hop, skipping, and jumping through different key moments. It's almost like, well, we have to have this key moment. We have to have this key moment. Let's just stitch them together, and people can try to figure out what happened in between the gaps. And I was able to understand what was missing, but I don't see how anybody else who didn't know Apple's history would know what in the world was going on half the time.
I agree, and I think what the film seemed like to me, we're saying basically our negatives here are the script and then the direction. And with the script, I felt like basically it was like a checklist. It said, okay, we want to mention the fact that, or we want to show that he parked in the handicap space. Okay, check that nuance off.
Yes.
He worked at Atari. Check. He cheated Woz out of money for the job that he did for Atari.
Was done, and they showed that happening, and it never was readdressed. It never came back to have any impact on how we learned about these characters.
And so, check. So all these little things that you've heard about, okay, mentioning the Apple name and somehow how they came up with the Apple. Okay, check. And they were rushing through to get all these little bullet points and all these items checked off, that it didn't make for a cohesive. It was like a greatest hits collection of Steve Jobs.
And that's fine if you're going to do a greatest hits. I mean, that's why documentaries can kind of spend more time, because they don't have to over dramatize these key moments. But we had so many moments in this film of just 2 people talking, and the dialogue was written to say, basically, we're going to try to get everybody up to speed as why these 2 people are talking. And then this dialogue, it has to cram in so many key messages at one time. And then we're just going to float and do a montage until the next moment where we have to have 2 people talking, letting you know what's going on. It was forced. But I will tell you my biggest hang up in this film. I mean, I think the script was horrible. I think maybe the director could have done better if he had a better script to work with. I don't know. But overall, the overall directing just didn't seem to be very inspired. My biggest issue with the film, though, is that we did not get to learn through the course of this film why the characters were the way they were.
That's true.
We see Steve Jobs going from brilliant moments as an entrepreneur to horrible, horrible behavior. And they try to drop a hint early in the film with one throwaway line he uses when he's on LSD as a college student about the fact that he was given up for adoption when he was born. And you think, okay, well, that's obviously going to carry on and have some reasoning for maybe why his personality is the way it is. No, it was mentioned, never mentioned again, even to the point where if he had not actually said mom and dad at some point to two people we see wandering through a house at one point, I would not have known that those were now his adoptive parents, and they never make any mention of the fact
You just thought they were like landlords or something.
Well, it's just that they go and find a garage, and the person showing them the garage around, there's never any acknowledgement of this is my house and this is my garage. This is my dad showing me around the garage. It was just, everything was so rushed. And yes, we made that one little comment about him being adopted back when he was on an LSD trip. That's all we have to do, is almost like what the filmmakers seem to say. We don't have to say anything else about it. But yet, you never understand why it is that he, and it's not a spoiler, I mean, this is very common biography knowledge of it, why he refused to believe that his girlfriend's pregnancy was his and why he was so cold about it. There's reasons for that kind of behavior, that kind of erratic behavior. We never got into that at any level. It was all surface hits, like you mentioned, greatest hits. Let's just keep rolling. As long as we fulfill our checklist, we made a Steve Jobs biography.
And I agree. In one of the most jarring instances of bad script, and I kind of was like, if you didn't know the story, if you hadn't read the books and you went to go see this, I think you'd be mad and more confused. Was he gets, it's, you know, like you say, it's common knowledge. He gets kicked out of Apple. He goes and forms this other company. You don't get any background of what's going on at that company. And then suddenly he's gardening. He has a new wife and three new kids, or like new kids. And you're like, whoa. And it's done really tacky where it pans up from him gardening. And it's like, here comes new wife. And they call out their kids' names so that you realize, oh, yes,
so
Reed
bad.
is my new child. And this is
So
it's
bad.
just, it's so poorly handled.
Yes, it was.
So
actually, the whole last half of this film was atrocious. I think the first half had some value to it. I actually kept thinking, okay, this is going to be okay. It's not going to be great.
It
but
lulls
it's
you
gonna
in
be
kind of a
okay.
false sense of security.
The last half was so slapdash, thrown together, scenes jumping from place to place with no sense of what was really going on and how they got there. And then even that scene you mentioned where he's walking through the house and you're kind of reintroducing where he is now. And it's like Lisa, the girl, the child that he refused to acknowledge at the beginning of the film. Was
Poorly
even his,
handled the character
is now
of Lisa.
sleeping on his couch. He's like, Lisa, it's time to get up or whatever. No other mention about it. So in other words, I know as a biography that he eventually did have a relationship with Lisa as his daughter. And for a while she did live with him and all that. That was never addressed. You basically had to try to figure it out yourself.
Yeah.
It was almost like this film was designed for you to have to go back and read on Wikipedia or look up websites to fill in all the details.
Right.
And that shouldn't be the way a film like this should work.
No.
I think it could have been a lot better if they had picked a certain period of time to focus in on. Because it is a lot of information to share in a 2-hour movie. You either have to go with a mini-series approach on a subject like this, or you've got to pick a specific time period and say, we're just going to talk about this. I think the film could have been successful if they had started when Apple was already incredibly successful. Steve Jobs was at the top of his game.
Sure.
Then you get him getting ejected from the company and having to build himself back up. With the occasional flashback to him as a college student, just so you had a little bit of flavor for what it was like. But to spend the first 30, 45 minutes almost on pre-Apple, and then you get Apple stuff, and then it was just rush to get you to the end point. It just didn't work. The format was bad. The script was really bad. The dialogue at times was really just over the top. Things would happen. Characters would say things, and you wouldn't understand why they were now deciding this because we didn't get any depth into what their thought process was. It was a very surface film, very disappointing.
I would agree. And I think when I said kind of at the top that Kutcher's performance kind of saved, I wouldn't say saved it, but it was the shining positive that made me willing to stick with the movie.
It gave you something to latch onto that was actually decent to watch. I agree.
And there were other good actors in the movie. There was Del Mulroney, and I liked him. And then there was J.K. Simmons. And
well, J.K. Simmons, I normally like. I will say, on this movie, he really irritated me.
But I think it's
a script. It was a script. I realize that, but it's like you might as well just go on ahead and put a curly mustache and a black cape on him because it was so from shot one. This is the bad guy. Every line of dialogue was so over the top, bad guy, bad board director. Yes, it was script, but J.K. Simmons didn't really do it any favors by giving his character any nuance at all. I mean, it was basically, I'm the bad guy. I come in, I say some bad things, I get mean with people, I do the bad things.
And I liked Matthew Modine's performance as John Scully, who was played the guy from Pepsi.
He had a little more depth to him because there was actually some things he was having to wrestle with. And you kind of got a sense of that. I agree. I thought he was okay.
Yeah,
I didn't even realize Leslie Ann Warren was Steve Jobs' mother. Who has like 2 scenes. One, probably the worst scene of the film, where you had who is it, Dermot Mulroney as Mike Markula, who came in to give an investment money, and they come sit down at the dinner table in the house, and everybody's standing around in a circle, and the mom's over there smiling, so happy because her son's getting ready to get some money. It was so ridiculous, but she had maybe 2 lines in the whole movie. You got a good actress there. I mean, you couldn't do anything with her. It was. Ron Eldard as Ron Holt, an engineer. Very, very small part, but I thought he was pretty good. Overall, good actors, good performances for the most part. It's just horrible script and poor directing of a horrible script. And
it had potential, and I think I'm sad because, the Ashton Kutcher's performance is now wasted.
I mean, it did show that the guy has a little more range than we're used to. I still think
just playing comedy was what he did.
I still don't think he's a strong actor, and I do think in this movie he was playing his absolute top best he could do.
Sure,
but I think it was good enough if it had been in a better scripted movie. So,
agreed.
So Jobs, we're both down on it, saying it's not great. I'm mad more from a personal level because there again, when you see a subject matter that you're passionate about and you really enjoy and you want to see it done justice on the screen, this was not doing it justice at all.
Agreed.
I kind of relate it in a way to Hitchcock as another example, in that Hitchcock was a much better film.
Okay.
But it was the same thing for me where I knew so much about the person and the subject matter and the backstory. I don't need the film to be a perfect representation of that.
Sure.
But there's got to be some level of depth. And at least with Hitchcock, Hitchcock was not a perfect movie by any stretch of the imagination. But I at least got some insight as to Alfred Hitchcock's mentality of why he was making the decisions he was making, why he wanted to make Psycho, what was driving him. With Jobs, you get so little of that other than, I just want to be successful. That's really all we ever got out of it. We never got any other drive for him as to why he made the decisions, why he had the reactions and the sometimes very, very cold, distant, inhuman type of approach to things. We never got any of that.
And I think a frustration is that there are other interesting characters, the character of Steve Wozniak, the character of John Scully, the character of Johnny Ive, he's in here as a designer, but they never really fleshed out these people, and that would have added so much more. You would have understood Steve because of the people he surrounded himself with, and these interesting people, and instead they just glossed over it all. And
it was very glossed over is exactly the right phrase for it. It was just on the surface, not deep at all. So very disappointing for me. Sounds like not one you're recommending necessarily either.
No.
So that's Jobs, and so now I gotta take a little break and cool off a little bit. I'm still kind of mad right now. I'm a little frustrated. But so let's go on to a happy subject. Let's go on to our next film review.
Oh, okay.
So let's move on to our next review, which is the documentary The Act of Killing. Chris, we recently had the privilege of seeing the documentary The Act of Killing, which is a fairly new film. The director, Joshua Oppenheimer. And let me do my best to describe what this film experience is all about, and then I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this. This is a documentary. Other than some titles at the very beginning, I don't think there's any scripting. There's no narration. There's no accompanying music. Right. Other than a music video, which I'll talk about here in a moment. It basically is talking about Indonesia, former death squad leaders. Okay, these are people that back in the mid-'60s, when there was a military coup to throw out the government, military took over. There were death squads where basically anybody accused of having communist trends or tendencies was executed. There were individuals associated with the military that were carrying out these death squads. Am I right in remembering that 2 million people died? Is that the number I remember hearing?
I cannot remember the number, but it was
huge.
It was a big number, yes.
So what this documentary is doing now, these death squad leaders in many aspects of today's Indonesian culture are still regarded as heroes.
Yes.
The documentary is basically following one in particular, although there's several others we meet along the way. But one in particular, Anwar's Congo, who was a very famous death squad leader, supposedly himself murdered thousands of people. I believe I remember hearing him say at one point it was a couple thousand people or so.
Yes.
They are being given the opportunity to recreate some of these situations, some of these execution situations for a film that they're making. Now, I don't know the premise in which they were proposed this opportunity.
They
never went into
show that,
which I think was okay. I didn't need to know that. I don't know if it was where the director, Joshua Oppenheimer, approached them and said, hey, I want you guys to recreate these for a film.
As a celebration of maybe how you're heroes or something.
Right. Or I don't know if Oppenheimer heard that they were planning on doing this already and said, I want to go document all this and actually see what's going on with it. I don't know the background.
Sure.
But basically, these death squad leaders are getting together, some of them almost like a reunion of old-timer death squad leaders, getting together and recreating on sound stages and other places some of the executions they performed.
Yes.
You had some that were more interrogation-based that ended in death. You had one that was a full-out demolition of a village, carrying out murdering all the villagers in that situation, all being restaged for a film. And the death squad leaders themselves are very much, they want to do this. They're excited about making the recreation and retelling the story is the way they look at it. I'm helping share the story with the rest of the nation of how they eradicated all these communists from the country. It's a very harrowing documentary. I'll go right off the bat and say it's a tough watch.
Yes.
It's a very tough watch. But Chris, I do want to ask you, I know it's a tough subject matter and I know there's a lot of emotion involved, but in the end, what did you get from this documentary? I mean, did this carry with it the weight at the end that honestly, given the subject matter, it needed to have? Did it pull through? And what do you think Joshua Oppenheimer's role in playing this film? What was his goal? What was his desire on this whole thing after watching it?
Well, not knowing how he got the opportunity to go interview these guys basically and shoot them performing these scenes or reenacting these scenes, I'm not sure what his goal was or what he wanted people to get from the film. But I can say that was the film effective to me as a documentary? Yes, but it was unsatisfying in that I feel like it left out a lot of details as you described how this happened, the effect on people outside that were being interviewed, the effect on the country, interviews with current government officials, or it gave you a very narrow look into what had happened in Indonesia. But I appreciated the fact that I did get this look because I was basically oblivious to the fact that this had happened. Yeah. And it was haunting me in the aspect of people can do really horrible things to one another, and you can always explain it away. Oh, I'm doing it for the country. Oh, they're communists. Oh, I'm doing this. And then the individuals appear to be, some do, haunted all these years later. And maybe through the process of this filming these reenactments, they come to realize, wow, what we did is we killed a lot of people in very cruel and sadistic ways. Even you keep using the word sadistic over and over again. And at one point, the Anwar's Congo guy that you're talking about, there was a point when it kind of maybe hit home to him where he was being asked to be in a scene and be the one being executed. Yes. So they had like an interrogation scene, and then they do these takes of him being strangled in a method that he had described was one that he did. Yeah. And they need to do another take, or say they need to do another take, and he can't do it. He said, I can't do that. I can't go through that again. I can't do it. And then later they show you scenes of him watching footage, kind of like the daily rushes, and watching footage from what they've shot so far. And he watches the footage, and then the director, you hear him ask him, well, what did you think of that? Why did you need to stop? He said, well, I had a moment, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I kind of had a moment of clarity where I realized what these people were going through, and I suffered like they suffered. Now, the director then does something that many people would criticize. He kind of crosses the line, and you hear his voice a lot, but he makes the comment, no, you didn't suffer like these people suffered. They're dead. Yeah, they knew they were going to die. You killed them. You did not suffer like they said. And the look on the person's face when he says on Anwar's Congo's face is kind of, it's like he's processing what's being told to him. at another point, he also says, have I sinned? Have I done wrong? Kind of like he's evaluating. He's now a grandfather.
Yep.
He has grandchildren. He dyes his hair to be in these reenactments black because he's, a white-haired old man. So it's an interesting, I shouldn't say interesting, it's a scary glimpse into human nature and what people can do when they were given power. So it's a tough watch, like you said. So that's what I got out. I'm glad to have seen it, but I'm not sure what the good that can, I guess, just to shed light on these atrocities, I guess.
Here's the way I saw the whole film. I immensely respect the film. I think it was a challenging film, and I got to give such props to the director for pulling it off, because I know I sense that his take on it is he knew this is something that had gone on, and he knew that these death squad leaders were still very high respected in the community and treated almost like heroes. And they really love the idea of recreating these scenes. And he's like, okay, I'm going to go with them and let them do this because I kind of want to be able to turn the mirror back on them like he did at the end of the film. Right. I think that was overall his end goals. He wanted to see if he could get them to start looking at themselves in the mirror and see if he got any kind of reaction from them or not.
Regardless of how it came about, it's just an interesting document.
Yeah.
So
now, I'll tell you right away, I mean, the first hour and a half where it's, we're going through scene after scene, we're getting to know these death squad leaders, these executioners. It started to get a little repetitive, and I started to feel like, it's okay, I get the point. We're watching them recreate how they murdered people over and over again, and it's tough to watch. And then yet they're still dancing and kind of being silly about
and
stuff
joking
in between
about
and joking about it in between. I mean, they're very flippant about much of it. The whole documentary came to a point where it really worked for me in that last 20 minutes or so.
Okay. Now, which
in the last 20 minutes, basically, you already described it, where he's watching the dailies, he's watching some of the footage, and I love the way the camera was set up for this last scene because you're just watching his face, and he's looking towards the camera watching the TV. So as you're watching his face as he's watching the scene, you slowly start to see where he had a smile, like, oh, look at me, I'm on TV, and look how I was doing this, to the questions you were asking, the whole, wow, okay, I'm starting to maybe feel like maybe this was bad. Mm-hmm. The whole idea of a documentary where you've detailed somebody who's done so much bad in their life and now they're starting to come to maybe a realization at the end is a pretty typical trope. We see it in a lot in the documentaries. And there's so many times where I don't buy it because I think, well, of course, this person is in front of a camera
they're going to act sorry.
Of course, they're going to act remorseful and sorry. I don't think that was the case with this film. I really did think that we were watching a human being slowly start to have some realization of what he had done. And I bought it. I mean, and even to the point where after that bit, we follow him as he walks back up to this rooftop where he had committed so many of these killings. And he's walking around kind of dumbfounded, trying to process it all. And he starts getting physically sick.
Yes.
I mean, it was not a staged
thing. Right.
It was really tough to watch. But you also kind of felt like there was a little bit of vindication at that, a little bit of that moment. It's like he's starting to get it. Mm-hmm. And it may have taken him 40 years to get to that point, but he's starting to get it, and you at least walk away from the film knowing that at least there is something haunting them at this point. It was a very, very powerful documentary. I wish I knew more about what led up to the point of making it and some of the backstory of it. And I guess that's something you could read up and find out about. But I think it's just to watch it is not to watch for any entertainment value, and it's not really for any information value other than you just know right off the front, this is what happened in Indonesia, and now we're going to follow these executioners. It's really more to get this gut reaction out of you by the end and really help us understand how people process the idea of death and murder and killing.
Yeah, there are, like you mentioned, at the very beginning, there are a couple of screens of text that give you a little bit of information.
Just enough. And
then you're left with, very rough, almost like home movie documentary footage.
I am going to say something, Chris, and this may be a little on the controversial side, but there was actually a point of me at one point late in the film where I almost sympathized with Anwar's Congo. A little bit.
Okay.
Not at all in his actions, obviously. What he did was atrocious and horrible. But I also got the sense that he was someone that was raised in this civilization, this culture. And when you've got such messages coming into your brain all the time, communism's bad, they must be eradicated, they've got to be killed or else it's going to kill us, or all this. to the point where his entire life he's taught, you kill these people, you get them out of the way, it's to make a better, stronger country. No matter what your biblical, your religious beliefs on killing is, I mean, there's got to be something said for somebody growing up in a culture where that's what they're taught. That's what they're led to believe. And you go for all these years killing thousands of people and you're treated like a hero by the other people in your community.
It's not kind of brainwashes you into thinking everything's okay.
So it's almost a matter of, I mean, yes, what he did was despicable, but obviously it's the culture and the people around him that were making him believe that this was okay and this is fine to do for all these years and you're going to be a hero, you're going to be saving us if you do it. That's where the real harm lies, is the culture he grew up with. It's not him individually.
Correct. You know? And that's where I guess the broader documentary aspect of this could have been investigated. My understanding is limited of this subject, and the text at the beginning was very limited in helping me understand, but he was not the government. He was basically a thug, if you want to use that word. Gangsters. Yep. Which it's like they're proud of that term.
Gangster, technically to them, means free
man.
Yep.
So that's an interesting, and they keep saying that's from the English free man. Like, it's interesting how they interpret things. But the government, when the communists were over there and the military came in, they didn't, like the military leaders, they didn't really want to get their, I guess, hands dirty. So they basically hired these gangsters to go out and do all their dirty work. That way they could, run the country and lead the country. So yeah, he is at fault. He definitely is at fault. But like you're saying, I wish I could have had some more background on the environment that caused this to happen.
Yeah.
From a documentary perspective.
Yeah. It's a tough watch.
Yes.
It's a very, very challenging subject. Not for the faint of heart, because it is very, very focused on the description and recreation of how people were executed in many, many violent ways. We do have a little bit of a very surreal item weaving through the film, where part of this film that they're making includes a music video for a song called Free Man, based on this idea of what gangster stands for, which is shot with exotic dancers out in a jungle with waterfall in the background.
And some characters that were, gangster people in drag as well.
Yes, there's one in particular, that individual who is kind of the secondary person we followed throughout the whole film.
Congo, right.
We get to find out he's a very odd character, is in drag quite a bit, which we're not really sure why. His name is Herman Kodo. Okay. And he actually runs, but they show how he runs for a government position at one point.
Right, which
does not win.
Bizarre.
He's in drag quite a bit during the music video portion and some other recreated scenes. The music video itself is just incredible to watch, just how they envision them. Even one scene in that music video, you have somebody with the wire around their neck representing somebody who was killed, taking the wire off their neck and handing it to Anwar's, saying, "Thank you for killing me."
Yes.
Because you have helped me move on to a better place and lead a better life.
Right.
And that's really how they saw themselves. They were celebrating the fact that by killing all these people, they felt like they were doing a greater service to that person as well as to their country. And to see it expressed in this really over-the-top bad 80s music video was just very, very strange.
I found myself curious. Now, I guess the benefit would have been, if this was on a DVD instead of as a movie, like in a movie theater, if I could have seen the end product. Like, if it would have made, I kind of wanted to see as a bonus feature or something, these scenes as the completed work. And I don't know if that even exists.
I don't know either.
But I was just curious to see, because you only saw bits and pieces, what the final
product. You saw most of it behind the scenes making of it, but then you did see a few finished pieces that they shot, and replayed. So, tough film, tough watch, but a very interesting, provocative documentary. If this sounds like something up your alley, what we described, it's certainly worth checking out. But at the same time, we don't fault you if there's many of you that don't choose to seek this out.
If you are into documentaries, then this is an interesting one, and it's worth seeing. But yeah, it can be tough.
Very, very tough. Okay. So that's our reviews. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to hit a couple quick news items and end with our recommendations for the episode. You're listening to Footcandle Films here on the Mesh.tv. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm 2012 Greater Hickory Kia Classic champion Fred Funk. Please join us for the 11th annual Greater Hickory Kia Classic at Rock Barn, October 14th through the 20th. Watch me defend my title against a fantastic field of Champions Tour players. Weekly grounds badges are just $50. Individual tickets are $20 per day. Get your tickets today at the GreaterHickoryKiaClassic.com.
Hello and welcome back to Footcandle Films. You just heard us give our reviews in the first half of the show of the film Jobs, which neither of us are really giving a glowing recommendation for. It actually made me angry. And then we talked about the documentary, The Act of Killing, which both of us are saying a challenging documentary. If you're into documentaries and if the subject matter is interesting to you, it's definitely worth checking out. A very, very provocative documentary. But a challenge to watch. So we'll leave it at that. But I think we both respected it quite a bit for what it was doing. So, Chris, let's lighten the mood a little bit.
Okay.
Between my angry review at the beginning and between a very deep, dark, depressing documentary, let's go a little lighter, shall we?
Yes.
This is hot off the press news as of about 12 hours ago.
Okay. I was probably screening Jobs at that.
We've talked a little bit about the Superman Batman movie that now is going to be the next Superman movie coming down the pike. Didn't we talk about that in a previous show? Mm-hmm. We announced it that that was a Comic-Con announcement. They're making the next Superman Man of Steel sequel is going to be Superman versus Batman. All that. We talked a little bit about who would be cast as Batman.
Sure.
Do you know?
No.
You don't know who got cast as Batman?
No, I remember us talking about it and who we thought.
They just announced it last night.
Wow.
You want to take a stab in the dark. He is a very well-established actor.
Okay.
Very well-known actor.
Do I get to know?
Who has played a superhero in another comic book adaptation before.
Huh. But it must have... Has he played Batman before?
No.
Oh, wow. I don't know. I don't even have any guesses because the people that I would have guessed were like Michael Keaton or George Clooney or something like that.
Considerably younger than both of those.
Okay. But he's played a superhero in
has.
Okay.
Well, he's played a Marvel comic book character.
So he's played Marvel, not DC.
A starring comic book character.
Oh,
in a movie.
Is it Eric Bana?
No.
I don't know.
Ben Affleck.
Whoa.
Ben Affleck has been cast as Batman in the Superman versus Batman movie that will be coming out in a few years.
Oh.
I can see from the look on your face.
Yeah, too bad this isn't a video. Okay.
There's some disappointment, maybe perplexed. I'm trying to read it.
Well, yeah. Ben Affleck, I admire him as an actor, as a director, but it comes down as simple as this. He's just not who I picture as Batman. Yeah. Now, he can come and completely blow my mind, and maybe he'll be awesome as a Batman. I'm not going to, slam on Ben Affleck as, I not Batman, but I just don't. To me, it would be just as natural if they said Jim Carrey was going to do Batman. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's about how, other than the fact that he does comedic roles and Ben Affleck's more serious, I just don't. Yeah. I don't really picture that. But, wow, that's interesting.
Well, there again, hot off the press as of last night, as we're recording this.
Wow.
Supposedly he's on board. It's the exact same crew that brought you Man of Steel are now doing this one.
Zack Snyder's directing. Is Christopher Nolan going to have anything to do with the script?
I don't know about that.
Okay.
That I don't know. But yeah, Ben Affleck signed on. Now, granted,
now, how do you feel about it? You asked me. How do you feel about it?
And I was the one who was really hard on Ben Affleck as an actor in Argo. If you recall that, I that was the one element of that film I despised is his acting in that. Ben Affleck is someone who I liked a lot in the old Kevin Smith movies. I thought he was really good, and then he's just really dropped in quality from an acting standpoint, I feel like.
Okay.
I would be much happier if I heard that he was going to be directing Superman versus Batman versus starring in it.
Okay.
But as it is, I thought about it. I slept on it last night. I'm okay with it because I think he at least, I know he can play the solid, no expression, no emotion face.
Because he did that in Argo,
down pat. Right? So maybe so. I think age-wise, he is a little older than the guy they've got playing Superman, which I think is what they were kind of shooting for. He can probably play grizzled a little bit more than we've seen him play. I don't know. I'm curious to see. Of course, when Tim Burton announced that it was going to be Michael Keaton playing Batman back in the late 80s, everybody all freaked out and said there's no way Michael Keaton can be Batman. He was pretty darn good. So anything's possible here. But that's where we are with that news.
I will say, I guess my take on it is it's very, obviously, I couldn't guess who it was, so it was a very interesting choice. I guess
just for those of you checking at home, he played Daredevil in the Daredevil movie many years ago that was not very good. But I don't think it was his fault. Kind of like I said about George Clooney in the Batman movie he was in. I don't think it was Clooney's fault, just like I don't think Daredevil was Affleck's fault. I think it was just bad movies all the way around.
Right.
I think Ben Affleck wants another shot at trying to play a big
comic book hero.
Now, this will be interesting. Ben Affleck will be the only actor to actually have played on screen both Superman and Batman. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, he was in the movie Hollywoodland, where he played George Reeves, who was the on-screen Superman from the old serials back in the 30s and 40s.
Huh.
So he actually got to dress up as Superman in that film and play out some of the Superman scenes when they were doing that movie as a dramatic film about George Reeves' life.
Okay.
So now he gets to claim to fame to say he has gotten to play both of those characters.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
All right. Let me move on to something else I thought was interesting. Again, in the pop culture geek, big blockbuster vein.
Sure.
Another interesting announcement just came out about the new Star Wars movie.
Okay.
This one I'm very excited about. So, a little background here. Of course, the original trilogy were all shot 35 millimeter film because digital didn't exist at that point.
Right.
And they used models quite a bit.
Yes.
Now, fast forward to the latest trilogy, episodes 1, 2, and 3. Episode 1 was shot on 35 millimeter.
Okay.
But used a lot of CGI, obviously. 2 and 3 were shot digitally.
Okay.
It was just announced that we have a director of photography for Episode 7 working with J.J. Abrams. His name is Dan Mendel, who's got quite a pedigree for filmmaking. He's done, I'm trying to look at his name here to see. He's done a lot of big films.
Okay.
I can't pull him up right now, but I'll get to that in a second. But it's going to be shot on 35 millimeter.
Really?
Yep. And
Abrams isn't a big proponent of 35. I mean, he's a filmmaker, but is he a big proponent of 35?
Well, supposedly the 2 Star Trek films he's done were both 35 millimeter shot.
Okay, I did not know that.
And that's his thing.
Okay.
And supposedly rumor is that the people at ILM have been building up their model shop and working on some secret things. So there's a rumor that there will be a lot more traditional models like we're using in the original, practical special effects versus everything being CGI and digital.
To me, as a moviegoer and as somebody who I really appreciate, obviously, because of the time I was born, the original Star Wars movies and things, I think there's something to be said for trying to marry the two of digital versus practical, because I think digital, you're like a kid in a candy store. You can do anything you want, and because of that actually limits the believability of it. Yes. Whereas models, there was only so much you could do because it would look like a pie pan on a string, so that would kind of limit you. So I think there's something to be said about using practical models and things, but then cleaning it up digitally.
Sure, absolutely. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I think that's...
the Star Trek movies, the last couple ones, I think have been good examples where, it's a whole lot of CGI. But if you notice, when they're on board the Enterprise deck, I mean, that's a real set.
Okay. And I feel like you can tell that it's a real set.
You can feel that there's just an authenticity to a lot of it.
There's like depth and just something. And actually, it comes down to something as simple as actors can act better when they're on a set.
I completely agree. J.J. Abrams is a big proponent of having sets. And I think anytime you see stuff on the Enterprise and the Star Trek films, most of it are real sets built.
Okay.
Now, when it couldn't be a real set, obviously it's CGI, but very rarely do you have an actor standing in front of a huge green screen and acting out all their scenes.
Gotcha.
Dan Mendel, the who's going to be the cinematographer for Episode 7, basically he's J.J. Abrams' cinematographer. They've worked together on Mission Impossible 3, both of the 2 Star Trek films, Super 8, all that.
Okay, so he worked with them on the Star Trek films. That bodes well.
So in other words, the look is going to be very similar, I think, to what we've seen on the Star Trek films, which I'm happy with. I like the look of those 2 films better than I have the more recent Star Wars films.
Right.
The recent Star Wars films look more like cartoons and video games, where I think the Star Trek movies have looked more realistic.
Sure.
I've bought their environments a lot more than I did the Star Wars ones. So I think this all bodes well.
Yeah.
And I'm crossing my fingers that maybe there is going to be more practical model, special effects, in-camera work, whatever. That would be exciting to think that we can actually see some things that just give us a little bit of that nostalgic feel that I think we were really desperately missing from the more recent Star Wars movies. Well, that was my 2 pieces of news there. Okay. I just thought, let's cleanse the palate a little bit. Let's get some big blockbuster sci-fi information out there. Both of those actually just came about yesterday, news-wise. So I thought it was interesting to share on that. So with that, Chris, let's go ahead and move right on into our recommendations. This is where every time we get together, we review new films, we talk about some news, but we always like to leave with that one film of, this is a film you ought to go check out. We think, you may have missed it. You may not be aware this film was out there. It's worth seeing, and especially with all the online distribution channels we have now, Netflix, Hulu, iTunes, Amazon. You can find just about any film you want to watch nowadays online. So, Chris, let me turn it over to you. What's the film you want to recommend for us today?
Well, I'm going to recommend a 2012 documentary called Indie Game.
Okay.
The movie
is about video games, right?
It is about video games, and the documentary follows a couple different independent game makers. So these aren't the guys that are making World of Warcraft or Modern Warfare, these other or Halo. They're not the people making these big, huge games. Normally, from what I understand from the documentary, it's one or two people doing all the work to make a video game. So you can imagine how stressful this is their job. Mm-hmm. They eat, breathe, sleep, that everything is a game, and they spend their life 3 years doing nothing but trying to get this game made and developed and pushed out there. And you see the stresses that go on, the disappointments, and it's a very interesting movie. And it follows games that I'd never heard of. A game called Fez, which I had never heard of. A game called Super Meat Boy.
But it's talking about these more independent, smaller budget video games,
correct.
Right?
I think the majority of them are released through Xbox Live, where you can buy these smaller
you
games.
buy for a few dollars type of thing, right?
So it's just interesting to see their thinking and how they approach it. Yes, it is their livelihood because it is their job, but they approach it as digital art, and they put the personality of themselves into the game, because there's not a team of 200 or 300 people making this game. It's just them. So it's very personal. And they're kind of proud of some of the rough edges that are in the games, how things aren't perfect, or they don't always make sense, or it's not these amazing CGI graphics, because they're like, this is personal, and it shows my personality that it's not always, perfectly glossy. And so it's just a very interesting take on it. And I really enjoyed it. Not having heard of any of the games or any of the individuals in the movie, these independent game makers, I found it really, really, really fascinating, and I would strongly recommend it. And it's, like I say, it's streaming on Netflix. So.
Indie Game, the movie.
Yes.
Okay, very cool. It's a documentary.
Yes.
Nice. So, Chris, my recommendation, we talked about the Batman Superman thing a little bit ago. So let's stay kind of on that superhero vibe, a little bit longer, if you can indulge me on this.
Oh, sure.
But not a very traditional superhero, supervillain movie at all.
Okay.
The film's name is Unbreakable.
Oh, yeah.
And it was the second feature film by Mr. M. Night Shyamalan. Now, for those of you who have been listening for the last few months, you heard us absolutely rail on After Earth just maybe 2-3 months ago at the beginning of the summer. Shyamalan is someone whose quality of work has gone down at a very, very fast pace.
Very rapid pace.
It's like a steep hill with a runaway, no brakes. Brakes are shot, car's going to implode at the bottom type of pace. So I've absolutely hated his last few films, which is why it pains me when I actually do go around and see some of his earlier films and realize how freaking good they were.
Yeah.
The Sixth Sense is still a great film, still holds up, even if you know the surprise well in advance. But his second film, when it came out, Unbreakable, everybody was all excited about this film.
Sure.
Because, it's the guy who made The Sixth Sense.
Unfortunately, he had to follow up The Sixth Sense.
He did. And it got out there in the press that there was some sort of twist ending at the end of this movie, too. So, of course, everybody's all rabid about going to see it. It made a lot of money the first weekend, and then it completely dropped off the radar because people were like, they didn't really care for it.
Sure.
It didn't have quite the flashiness. The surprise ending was not as big and shocking at all as The Sixth Sense was. So if you got past all the hype and you kind of revisit it years later, which I just recently did,
okay,
it's a really good film.
Okay.
And what it is we've got Bruce Willis, we got Samuel L. Jackson. Bruce Willis stars as someone, average Joe kind of guy. He works as security at a football stadium, problems with his wife at home, but yet he's in a train accident.
Okay.
And so many people die or get seriously injured in this train accident except for him. He basically walks off unscathed. Doesn't know why. And what you start to learn over time is that he's basically got superpowers. He's super strong and all this. But they never play it for spectacle. They never play it as your typical hero movie. This is about a normal guy who's starting to realize over the course of the film that he is endowed with some sort of abilities. He's not sure what to do with them. He's not sure what they make sense. And he comes to be somewhat friends with Samuel L. Jackson's character. I don't remember the name of the character offhand, but he does have a name by the end of the film.
Something Oh, okay.
Yeah, and Mr. Glass is what you find out his name is at the end. But basically, this gentleman is he collects rare comic book art, and he espouses all about the mythology of the comic book and all. When he meets David, Bruce Willis's character, he sees something in him that thinks maybe this is a real superhero. Maybe he's the one that walked away from this crash, and he's been in other situations where he's never been sick. Other things that just start to all of a sudden come together. And so the movie's really about the dynamic between these two characters. It's not about superheroics. It's not about action. There's none of that.
Sure.
There's only one scene late in the film that even has any smack of action. That's where David's character starts to realize that there's somebody who is going to break into somebody else's house and possibly harm some of the members of the family, and he goes and tries to stop the guy.
Gotcha.
But it's a really, really fascinating film, very well made, very plodding, slow pace, but it's a slow build. I mean, you really want to follow these characters and see where it ends up. It does have a twist at the end. I say a twist. It's got a revelation at the end.
Sure. That
you could kind of see coming if you were really thinking about it. And yeah, when it ends, it's pretty much you find out the revelation, and then there's a title card, and that's it. And it really, I think, left a lot of people saying, really, that was it? Well, Shyamalan planned this as a trilogy.
That's what I was going to ask you.
He planned this as a trilogy. This is kind of the origin story, the classic origin story of how a character starts to learn about his abilities. It was going to go into a second and third movie to be more of a full-form trilogy. It didn't make enough money to do that, so they abandoned it. But a lot of fans have been clamoring to say, we'd love to know what the next chapter is. Mm-hmm. So it is kind of an abrupt ending, and it's maybe a little dissatisfying ending, but the build-up to that, I think, is well worth it. I think it's a great film.
We're not going to flash back to our news segment. He's not planning on doing this.
No, believe me, that would be in my news category for sure if it was. So Unbreakable, I only say it doesn't seem like we should be saying that a Shyamalan film was under-received, and especially early in his career, but it was. I think.
Sure.
I don't think it got the attention it needed, so you ought to check it out. I don't know if it's on Netflix. I mean, I know it's on iTunes and Amazon, but anyway. So that's our recommendations: Video Game or Indie Game, the movie,
Indie Game,
and then Unbreakable. We had our reviews of Jobs and The Act of Killing, and we talked a little bit about some geekier news just to get things lighter in tone after our reviews. So that's our show for today for Footcandle Films. We do hope you have any ideas, suggestions, feedback for us. We hope you'd send it our way. We'd love to hear from you. You can reach us at info@themesh.tv. That's info@themesh.tv. I'm just all tongue-tied today, Chris. Info@themesh.tv is where you want to reach us. You can also go to the Mesh website at themesh.tv, and that's a good place to go. You can fill out the little contact us form and drop us a note that way, or you can go back and listen to any other episode or show. You can also go check out all the other shows on the Mesh Network and let us know what you think of those as well. And, of course, our film society, the Footcandle Film Society, that helps make this show possible and kind of got us started on this path. We host a screening in Western North Carolina every month. If you're interested in learning more about the Film Society, you can go to footcandle.org. Right now, memberships are completely filled up. We've got 450 members that come out and check out films every month with us. But if you'd like to stay in the loop or at least be on the waiting list or just learn more about what we're doing, that's footcandle.org. You can do that. Again, my name's Alan.
I'm Chris.
And we're with Footcandle Films. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll look forward to talking to you next time.
See you in the ticket line.
Special thanks to Carpal Tuller for the show theme music. For more about Carpal Tuller, visit www.carpaltuller.com. You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.
Oh, and Chris, one thing I forgot to tell you about when I went to go see Jobs the other night.
Yes.
It was a 10 p.m. screening on a Tuesday night here in Hickory, North Carolina.
I did a 10 p.m. screening last night.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah.
Hickory, North Carolina, not very well attended. There was only one other group there in the theater besides me and my friend.
I was the only one there.
You were? Wow. Okay, cool. Well, I just need to say this as a public service announcement. The family and the gentleman that were in the theater in the rows behind us on the 10 p.m. screening this past Tuesday had a really bad flatulence problem to the point where it was very loud many, many times.
Oh, no.
I'm just saying this as a public service announcement. First off, sir, please, I hope you visit a hospital or doctor soon because that is a medical condition that you need to have evaluated.
Oh, no.
And I'm just saying, in the future, I would just please ask that if you know that you're suffering from this problem and you go to a 10 p.m. screening, maybe hoping that nobody else will be there and that your problem will not be as detected by everybody else. If you see other people in the theater, I would ask that maybe you go see if there's another film even less populated to enjoy that evening. So that's just public service announcement. If you were there at Carmike Cinema, Hickory, North Carolina, 10 p.m. this past Tuesday, please seek medical attention as soon as possible.
Wow.